Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Hello, my name's Lewis Dunn. I'm the host of the podcast, The Best Video Game You've Never Played. And I've popped up in this episode of Side Quests to talk to you about one of my favourite video games. And I'm willing to bet it's almost certainly one of the best video games you've never played. No More Heroes for the Nintendo Wii was one of the Wii's original cult hits. It had a weird and unusual art style. It had an over-the-top attitude to violence and sexuality. And it also had good use of motion controls, which is to say, not much use of motion controls. No More Heroes broke out for studio Grasshopper Manufacture, helmed by Suda51, who at this stage was known among cult circles for games like Killer 7 and Flower Sun Rain, but with No More Heroes almost breached into the mainstream with a game that promised to bring violence to the Nintendo Wii, an unfathomable idea at the time, and something that was welcome to people who were starved on that platform for something a bit more adult. No More Heroes, though, isn't what I'm here to talk about. No More Heroes 2, its sequel, is the game that captured my heart, which is weird, okay? I know that a lot of you are already thinking, well, No More Heroes is a pretty weird choice, but let me reassure you, for fans of the series No More Heroes 2 is the black sheep. It is the ugly stepchild. It's not quite Travis Strikes Again, but it's on that level. Crucially, as far as I can tell, No More Heroes 2 Desperate Struggle is the only No More Heroes game that wasn't directed by Suda51. No, instead that honour goes to Nobutake Ichiki, who took over the directorship of the game while being overseen by Suda51. Now you might think, surely a game leaving from its original creator is a sign that the game will drift away from its original vision. And to some extent it does. But I think, possibly, for the better. You see, No More Heroes, the original game, is sort of undeniably a comedy, at least when it's originally presented. The whole idea of No More Heroes is that Travis Touchdown, an otaku living in a dead-end backwater nowhere city in America called Santa Destroy, buys what is effectively a lightsaber off eBay, and then, while drunk at a bar, is convinced by a pretty lady to kill a man. This kind of tells you the kind of man Travis is. He is a man of low morals and high libido. No More Heroes 2, however, is not presented as a comedy. No More Heroes 2 is presented as a revenge film. Travis's best friend, Bishop, is killed by Jasper Bat Jr., the CEO of Pizza Bat, who appeared in the previous game through a series of side quests that you would have absolutely missed if you didn't read the text. Now, out for revenge, Travis must ascend the assassin ranks once more in order to get to number 1. Jasper now being the number 1 ranked assassin, a title that Travis formerly held until it's not really made clear how Travis lost that ranking, and certainly that doesn't make any sense, because if it was Travis who was the previous number 1 assassin, the way that Travis ascended the ranks was that he killed everyone in the previous game, and no one's come after to kill Travis, so how has Travis become number 51? Hey guys, I don't think the plot of this video game makes any sense. Regardless, Travis needs to now set out to kill the 50 ranked assassins above him, an impossible task, and definitely something the game will cheat at in numerous stages. But here's the thing, No More Heroes 2 sort of knows that it doesn't make sense. It's reveling in the fact Travis seems to have completely reset as a character, which, given the ending of No More Heroes, doesn't necessarily make sense. Why is Travis still pursuing Sylvia? Even though he knows Sylvia was a con woman from the previous game, and is actually betrothed to, well, his twin brother, who he didn't know he existed until the ending of the previous game as well. Even weirder, Travis is out for revenge because Bishop was killed? I mean, Bishop was a cool guy in the first game, you know, he'd teach you wrestling moves through the videotapes you could rent from him and would request that you returned the inappropriately named porn films that Travis kept renting. But he wasn't exactly the most fleshed out character in No More Heroes. If anything, it kind of feels like Travis is killing people because, well, that's what Travis does. Before he gets to killing people, though, Travis has to do what he always does in these games, which is go and make some cash. Oh yes, it might well be that the assassin rankings are a huge scam, but he's not allowed to get anywhere near Jasper Bat Jr. until he makes money to pay for each match. Now, the side jobs in this game are a huge upgrade on the first game, and I know they got rid of the open world, but let's be realistic. The open world in that game was essentially an enormous 3D menu that you kept crashing your bike in. No, in this game, all of the side jobs are reimagined as 8 or 16-bit video games that mimic favourites like Road Rash or kind of Pac-Man in other ways. Each of them are quick and fun and easy to play, and they are a hoot. Of course, in this game, I should have even pointed out, you can even just plug in a classic controller if you're a dweeb who doesn't like having fun. Because this game, of course, makes use of the motion controls in much the same way the first did, with a very satisfying final slash mechanic. When you're about to land the killer blow on an enemy, you get to do it, swiping the Wii remote in the direction and watching the blood flow. Oh, pro tip, if you keep shaking the controller after you deal the final blow, a lot of things around you are going to die. However, once Travis has made his money, he can go and fight the bosses, and No More Heroes is nothing if not a huge cavalcade of spectacular, unusual bosses. Great examples in this game include Nathan Copeland, a rapper who has huge mechanical boombox arms. He goes and fights Charlie McDonald, a jock with a huge army of cheerleaders, all of which make it up to the rank 25. Yeah, I told you this game was going to cheat. And of course, there are loads of other unusual things to do. One of the things this game does that the previous doesn't is you get a challenger. Kimmy Howell, a schoolgirl, actually tries to take your rank from beneath you. And actually, I think Kimmy starts to mark the point at which this game starts to take a turn on its tone. You see, this isn't the first time Travis has fought a young schoolgirl. In the previous game, he fought Shinobi, a young schoolgirl in America who was number 9 ranked in the Assassin's League, and Travis couldn't bring himself to kill her. She was too young. She was in a position where she maybe didn't know exactly the danger she was in. And in this game, she returns, now in service of Travis, calling him master and treating him like he is now responsible for her. And she will throw herself at Travis in a way that's possibly more inappropriate than it was in the previous game. This is interesting because in these situations, Travis, of course, rejects Shinobi's advances, but that's not really like Travis. Travis has always been a hypersexualized, hyper-violent deviant, and now he's turning down a woman who calls him master? It's even weirder as the game goes on that Travis starts to realize that a lot of the people that he is now in a position of power over, a lot of the assassins who he's killing, he starts to feel bad about. Eventually, he starts to come to respect a lot of his opponents and finds that killing them is making him feel awful. The violence, while maybe not unnecessary in the long term if he wants to achieve his goal of vengeance, is disgusting and makes him feel awful. Throughout the game, Travis comes to hate more and more of what he's doing, and even at the end of one fight, collapses to the ground in pain and cries out that he wants to end all of this. No More Heroes 2 is a game that sets you off with the power fantasy of being a hyper-violent, hyper-competent assassin who's too cool to play by the rules of normal assassinating, while also giving him a shitty day job and making him an otaku. But as the game goes on, maybe Travis's fantasies and ideas of sexuality are warped and wrong. Maybe as it goes on, he comes to realise that what he doesn't want is necessarily just to have sex with Sylvia, the object of his desires and the endless source of innuendo and teasing throughout the game, but what he actually wants is a partner. What he wants is companionship. Towards the end of the game, Travis eventually manages to confront Jasper Bat Jr., who becomes a huge inflatable monster and even parodies the final boss fight in Batman Arkham Asylum. But actually, Henry, the brother of Travis, and someone who considers himself above all of this ridiculousness, quits the game and says it's too stupid even for him. Travis, not quite unable to turn down the challenge of finally taking out the guy who was responsible for Bishop's death, decides to go ahead and finish the game regardless, in a spectacularly over-the-top boss fight that, well, it's stupid fun, and the game knows it. But this boss fight, while stupid and over the top, also helps resolve one of the game's weirder points. You see, one of the points I've neglected to mention is that the whole story of No More Heroes 2 is being narrated by someone who almost certainly appears to be Sylvia. But she's a peep show girl now. She's behind a window, and you play in a first-person perspective of someone who's come to visit her. As she tells the story of No More Heroes 2, she adds poetic flourishes. She talks about all of the contestants like they're supernatural entities, like they're fairy tale characters almost. But you come to realise that everything she's talking about has already happened. And Sylvia's now just a peep show girl? But then again, she sort of always was, right? She was always just the object of Travis's sexual affection. She was never really fully developed into a larger character, and now here she is, fulfilling ultimately the purpose she always did, but in a much more dingy, nasty way. I won't spoil the full conclusion of the game and where it goes with this, but suffice to say, No More Heroes 2 actually has a lot in common with the original version of A Clockwork Orange, that is to say, the novel rather than the Stanley Kubrick film. Here is a character who, at the start of the game, revels in violence, delights in it, thinks it will bring him the vengeance that he needs in order to fulfill his quest, and by the end of the game realises that that violence is actually awful for him. No More Heroes 2 brings about maturity to a character whose fundamental characteristics are immature. And I think I love it for that. I love how it uses its form to be satirical about what it is. And I think that's the ultimate defying of expectation that No More Heroes 2 achieves, that I feel like No More Heroes 1, and especially No More Heroes 3, failed to do. Here is Travis Touchdown being developed in front of our eyes as a character and explaining why No More Heroes as a franchise is inherently poisonous in some respects to its audience. That is a deeply interesting and mature approach to video game storytelling. And don't get me wrong, it immediately makes this point through a series of horrifically over-the-top violent fights. This is form as satire. No More Heroes 2 resonates with me as a gamer because it caught me in that moment of being a teenager and coming of age. I'd loved the first No More Heroes. I'd loved its ridiculous over-the-top style. I'd loved its spitting in the face of ideas of narrative convention and making fun of the fact that it even was on the Nintendo Wii. Like, that was the joke, right? Here is one of the most violent video games of the year being presented to you on the same platform as Super Mario. But No More Heroes 2, in a way, is the more reflective game. It's the game that wants to make you think about the first game in a new way. And it's the game that's also fundamentally undermined by its sequels. I'll be completely honest with you, I think No More Heroes 3 absolutely stamps all over No More Heroes 2 in a way that I personally dislike, but in a way that I think a lot of fans of No More Heroes 1 were actually quite happy about. If you think of No More Heroes as the over-the-top violent game it presents itself as, maybe No More Heroes 2 isn't the one you want. It's the one in which there's more tedious combat. It's the one that takes away the overworld. It's the one that makes the mini-games into something that's fun and optional as opposed to something you need to do to progress throughout the game. But it's also the game that slows itself down and makes you think. It's the game that does what a lot of indie games do and uses its mechanics to teach you something about yourself. I love No More Heroes 2, and while certainly I think it's a game that's enriched if you play No More Heroes 1, I think you could jump to it, and it's certainly the better of those two to play. No More Heroes 2 allowing you to skip the tedious side jobs and open world in order to go straight back into the action, while it does make the combat feel somewhat repetitive after a while, is definitely the easier game to finish. Also, I've really talked this down, but the individual boss fights are themselves really fun and funny to look at. One returning character in particular, who you fight as Shinobi, is an absolute riot, and I won't spoil who it is for those who don't know, because his return is both a surprise and a delight. Overall, No More Heroes 2 is one of the best video games you've never played, which is what my show's all about. I play the best video games that guests bring on, and they say are the best video game I've never played, and then we discuss whether or not it is. I would love it if you could give No More Heroes 2 a chance. Like I say, it's on PC and Nintendo Switch right now. It's not even that expensive, and I think it's well worth your time if you're the kind of gamer who really wants to dig in and think about the things you're being presented with. And it's also quite fun if you just like chopping off people's heads and screaming. Happy gaming!
Hey, Nerf herders.
You sure you want to go with that?
Hey, everyone?
There we go. More inviting.
Have you ever had a movie that you really wanted to love, but something holds you back?
Or one that you did love in spite of a flaw?
Well, I'm Case Aiken.
And I'm Sam Alisea.
And on Another Pass, we sit down with cool guests to look at movies that we find fascinating.
But flawed.
And we try to imagine what could have been done when they were made to give them that little push.
We're not experts. We just believe in criticism.
Constructive criticism.
Sure.
So come take another pass at some movies with us.
And every now and then, we can celebrate movies that did it on their own, too.
You can find us at certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Pass it on.
CPOV.
certainpov.com.